Good afternoon. Let's commence the press conference of the film, the official section, out of competition, Lasa and Zabala. And we have with us the director Pablo Malo, the producer Jose Cortella, the scriptwriter Joana Urquijo. We also have the actors Unax Ugalde, Francesco Orella, Oriol Villa, and Ricard Sales. And plus, in the front row, and if questions are asked to them, they will answer. The actor John Ansa, Cristian Merchan, Iñigo Gastesi, Xavier Ortúzar, and Iñaki Ardanaz. And they are eagerly awaiting your first question, please. Your first question? Who would like to ask the first question? Yes, in the front row, very quickly, please. Hi, good afternoon. Last Friday, Ugar Fernandez was here. Ana Hernandez continues to be, it's as if we were all waiting something to happen. Francis, you're an actor who has used to great interpretations and the portraying of your roles and great acting. This character that you've portrayed in this film, has it demanded to look at it at much more understanding than other characters that you played? First of all, the obligation of an actor when one confronts a character, whether it be real or fictitious. In this case, it's a real character. It's real. You've got much more responsibility, and you've got to be much more faithful to portraying the role. And there was sufficient graphic documentation to have much more data upon the character. But the work of an actor, be it a true or a real or a fiction, the character, you've got to get under his skin to try to understand how this man thinks, Mr. Galindo in this case, his mental makeup, his ambitions, his fears, his obsessions. And that work is the same, whether it's a true character or fiction. But I realize that Galindo has meant what he has meant and what he has been in the Basque Country, and that's a bit of pressure for me, but at the same time it's a challenge, and for me it has been quite exciting to play in this role. Yes, a question for Pablo. The film is fiction, as you say at the beginning, based upon real, true events. However, we can't avoid seeing it with those documentary type eyes, apart from those licenses that you've taken. I'm thinking about the character of the assistant to Inigo, the lawyer. How did you address those real elements and fiction elements, and knowing that perhaps the audience can't stop seeing it as if it were a documentary? Well, it was clear in our mind, the producer and the scriptwriter as well as I, that the material that we were taking on was very delicate. Everything was going to look as if it were under a magnifying glass in the different versions. So therefore we set forth a certain character. The character could be the character played by Unax or perhaps Jesus Garcia, and who I've always said to the media is the hero, if we can talk about heroes of this film. And the character of the lawyer existed because the truth is the assistant to the lawyer existed, and what was quite good, it was like a contrast, or to counterpose, having someone who could accompany the character of Unax, that Unax plays. What's got to be clear that there had to be an arc within the story, and from the outset that we could use since 1983, when Josian and Joshi disappear, all the way through to the trial, was the character of the lawyer, and that's where someone, as I said, the presence of that character throughout the story has to do with the fact he's the only character that can accompany us throughout the entire story. Yes, hi. Good morning. My question is for the scriptwriter and the director. The characters, obviously Unax's character is much more, has a longer run dramatically, but the Guardia Civil, the police, are a bit archetype. They're like the good cop and the bad cop, perhaps a bit extreme. I don't know whether it was direction or script that has caused quite a lot of laughter in the room, and it's in the cinema theater. These characters of the Guardia Civil, the police, that is to say, and it was quite surprising. Did you draw them up that way? What was that due to? The fact that they were Well, I imagine Giovanni will talk about her, but I can talk about how they portrayed the roles for us. As we investigated, because this process is quite a long process, you start to realize that if we got heavy on the characters, those that portrayed the police or the Guardia Civil, they were going to be characterized, but the reality of these characters, and we know this due to different opinions and of different ideologies, was even much more extreme. All you have to see is videos, you have to read remarks and comments, and it's not a good guy, bad guy film, because that would have been too simplistic. Here, what's quite clear is there were characters who are doing something that's barbaric, and in the case of Bayo, his character as the character Unax is a person who has his head not too in the right place, told us stories throughout this process that we've not been able to conclude in the script. Joanne has not been able to include in the script because they were incredible. These were characters that I can assure you we were very careful, Oriol as well as Ricard, and not to lose control vis-a-vis the characters. I don't know why people laugh, but there were remarks in the script, because they're taking out from the trial proceedings, that these characters worked that way. That's how they did what they did. And the truth is, we've cut things down because it wasn't too good for the story if we have characterized these guys but they themselves talked. So therefore, and I feel very proud of how the actors have portrayed their roles, and I think that they portray in a very faithful way what each character was in this story. And to summarize what Pablo said, or to add something on, not only the characters they mentioned are enormously naturalized, so to speak, vis-a-vis to what we really had, or what happened in reality. Another character could be Dorado, the aspect he has, how he dressed, and the image that he had. All of this has been decalved by the way he behaved through the legal proceedings and the trial. We've eliminated things that were really horrible. If we'd have included them, it would have been a true comedy. But there was a moment that we weren't allowed to, well, we didn't even shoot it, when Bayo declares in front of Inax's character. What we were told was that Bayo's character jumped at Iñigo Iruin, his character. He followed him throughout the trial. After him, he fell one side, he switched the light off, and when the light came on, this man was the Spanish flag trying to kill the character of the lawyer. He wasn't able to. He threw this. So therefore, he caused a considerable amount of havoc. We tried to rehearse that situation. Oriol encouraged me to shoot it, but I said, well, we could have turned that sequence into a Benny Hill sequence, and it was sufficiently enormous what people were telling us already about that scene. And Unax, who was looking at me with a terrifying face, said, Pablo, no, let's not do it. We didn't shoot it. So I can guarantee that we've reduced the representation of certain characters, and we could have lost control. And I am very happy of how they were portrayed, each and every one of them, because there's a very interesting story that we haven't told by different people, and that would have been a caricature. But nevertheless, these characters, that's the way they were. In the back there, please. Hi. Good afternoon, Pablo. Can you confirm, at least to me, that you're one of the good directors? It's well narrated, the film, in a very excellent. It's a magnificent docudrama. But there's another audience that may see the film outside the Basque Country that may not understand that we're all against violence, and that's you characterize as one side or some characters and less, or make them much more noble and innocent. What would you answer to that? And if you'd allow me, without leaving one side, the other actor is an actor that I like very much, and I discovered him in this Secreto de Puerto Viejo, is Javier Ortuzan, and I liked him in this Cemetery very, very much. I want to congratulate him for Efren's role and also for the role that he played in this film. Thank you. Thank you. Well, to answer your question, well, we've spent a lot of time watching Irish films and English films, And here the truth is, we've used the legal proceedings, and everyone is portrayed as they were and what they meant in the story. The fact, and talking to Johannes and the producer, we didn't have the intention of give more character to both of the boys, because the life of they had were 20-year-old boys who lived in Bayonne, who lived a normal life within the circumstance of being refugees there. But there wasn't our idea, and some more sequences were written, and we shot much more that we've eliminated during the editing. But we wanted to base ourselves upon what we had. We had a big story to tell in a very short time to tell it. When someone called me and said we've decontextualized the story to a certain extent, I start to think about that, and I think that if we'd have told or tried to balance the film, telling some other attacks that they might have brought, and they may have been responsible for, perhaps we would have missed the real true part of the story. I think the scriptwriter has balanced very much the situation that we're confronting, and above all, I think that game of the flashbacks that we've used when they arrived and left, for example, and that I was quite fearful as we saw how big the film was being made, was becoming, because of its difficulty. There are 56 actors that say something, that have lines to say, and I'm glad with all of them. The truth was, we tried to find a balance so that the film was not excessively dispersed and difficult to follow. Yes, I would like to talk about this, Pablo. You've taken the bull by the horns, so to speak, but the material is quite sensitive, it's quite delicate, and you know that it's going to be looked at through a magnifying glass here in the Basque Country, the question whether you're afraid at any moment to making a mistake or shoving your foot into it or slip on something that's so easy to do when you've got in hands a story such as this. Well, when Jose Portela offered me to direct a film, well, initially we didn't know whether it was going to be a documentary or film. But people asked me, and then the one they said, "Oh, we're very sorry, my condolences for making the film." That showed me that I mentioned into what we were getting involved in, and the film was not going to be seen as a film per se. I've spent weeks and weeks talking about politics, which is something that I feel like I'm very little about cinema, which I'm quite envious to have seen my colleagues talking about cinema and movies. This is a film that I'm very happy with. It's quite clear from the outset that my position in this case, the moment in which I'm placing a camera in a place, I'm taking a position when I do one scene and take one take in a certain way. I can't bear violence. I can't understand that can communicate based upon violence. I think communication has to be to talk about one person talking with another person, dialogue. So therefore that was my position, and quite fortunately John's script was going along those lines. For two people that went through a barbaric situation, it was an event that should never have happened, and it's quite clear, and what I was trying to tell was something barbaric at a certain moment, and we didn't go into the Guardia Civil or the police, nor with the Socialist Party as a whole. We're not trying to blame anyone. We're telling the story of certain events that certain people took into account, and within a certain moment and a specific context. That's what we tried to tell in this story. The story can be used as something that people can use and to throw shit on the other's party. That is to say, this film was made with honestly. There aren't great discourses, and this story was just basically telling the facts. I could tell the facts of from the other side, and it's a pity that we continue to talk about sides. We're taking sides. Every time there's a story that someone's having a hard time, I always be on the side of the person that's having a hard time, wherever they come from and whatever they do. But I don't understand that we can communicate based upon violence and take sides. And I always say that after 50 years in this country, finally we start to realize that we can dialogue, we can coexist, and we can understand. And as the sisters say, and this is something that Jose and Johannes, when we met them, never, and I've talked, because geographically they live in Tolosa and Zaragoza, very close to them. When we were with them, I never heard them say a single word about hate or revenge, or they just simply mentioned, they talked about two people who disappeared and who were murdered in the horrible and brutal circumstances. And that's what at all times in the film, and the two boys that have played José y Josian, I always said, if you're able to give us that emotion on the screen, when I shoot at 4 a.m. and below zero and naked with all of the makeup, with all of the people there, if you're able to move people, I will go ahead with that way of shooting those sequences and scenes if you're capable. Otherwise, we'll just put bandages on you, we'll shoot you, and we'll shoot it that way. Quite fortunately, both of them did it extraordinarily well, and I believe that we were able to achieve amongst us all that the film can move things. And someone has said to me, well, that they deserved it because they got involved in where they got involved in. And I imagine, talked to a lot of people over this time, well, people have said that how many people would they have killed if they hadn't killed them. I think that approach is horrible. If someone comes out of that film with those ideas in mind and sees that this is horrible, then this shouldn't have never have happened at all, I think the film would have also been worthwhile making.
Sí, allá atrás, por favor.
I'm going to ask you a question. To a certain extent, you've just answered it, but nevertheless, I think with what you're saying, and in Lasa and Zabala, one of the images is in the popular imagery is still in people's mind is that of the Ertzaina, and at the cemetery, vis-a-vis the family, the Ertzaina is the Basque police. So if you reflect it in the way you do, but I think that perhaps that was a bit harder and harsher than what occurred there for real. At those moments were lived with quite harshly within the Basque society, and there were moments where out in the street people responded to this, everyone whichever way they deemed pertinent. And at that time, and for example, when the bodies of Lasa and Zabala go to Fuenterrabía, you talk in the morning. One of the characters said something, those scenes don't appear in the film. Why don't these scenes appear in the film, or why did you want to edit them out? Well, what happened in the cemetery, where there were two sides, or there was in two parts, better say, when colleagues of yours came along to the cemetery, and then at night when I was taken home, Basque policeman called me up, and plus we talked to another two who brought all of the attrezzo. We talked to them because Johannes was all there and José was there, and they gave us their version. They knew that they'd made a mistake, that it was an error, and they told their version. They told me the version of what had happened, and they said what they were there for, on the one hand, that they were ordered from Madrid that to not open the coffins, and that's why they entered into the cemetery. And the truth is, who they were controlling were those people that were on the other side of the family billboard. We've seen the images in the and it was a police raid that lasted 30 or 40 seconds, but obviously those people attacking older people and adolescents who were there at the cemetery, it seemed as if it was much harder than what it really was, harsher than what it really was. And what I've shot exactly looking at what happened there. In that sense, we didn't want to go overboard or show anything different to what really happened, because when I talked to this Basque policeman, because I said to him, hey, listen, the police raid was in the cemetery where there were only family and relatives, and it seems that they told us that they opened up to take a photo. One felt that he was hit, and he started to hit, and everybody followed him. We tried to be as respectful. We didn't want to go over the top vis-a-vis those scenes, and what we've represented is what happened. As regards to Hondarribia or Fuenterrabía, we just wanted, that was the national police. It was a police raid which was even harder and much more powerful. There are documents about this, and with Johannes when she was writing the script, and with Josian, we thought it was reiterative, and we started to discriminate because Johannes went crazy trying to group together the script and trying to make it coherent. We didn't want to go over the top, we didn't want to go over the top with torture and the issue. We didn't want to do we didn't want to make a gallery of horror or terror. What we were told or what happened, it made no sense to recreate it, because it was tough enough what we've already told in the story, and to have it added or included more minutes of a gallery of terror. I think the fact that the people wouldn't have watched it, and you feel bad when you leave the cinema theater. But what was quite clear is that torture as well as the murder, albeit people that I didn't shoot the murder because there were very violent scenes. One of the family members said, "Pablo, please tell what happened, even if we never see it, but please tell the story as it was." And we ensured ourselves that we told the story just as we said before when we talked about the characters that these people portray and what these people were like, that we have to bear in mind that it was in they physically couldn't bear more than 4 or 5 weeks in 8-hour shifts, and what happened there was total impunity amongst people who were 23 and 26 years of age, according to age, and 20 those that were receiving the torture. At that time, there had been an attack in Oñati, so therefore the amount of hate those nights in jail and the impunity of these policemen, what we've been told, made no sense, and due to the respect to the audience, to the family and the young boys and the people in general, would have made no sense to have shot this. Then there's something else, as well as what Pablo has just said. When you write a script and when you narrate it, you've got to give narrative a meaning. You can't just tell a story, a thing, because of everything has to have a certain measure. Everything's got to be in the right place. And apart from what you're saying, apart from the real value, we try to give it a symbolic value. Many more things occurred which were much more brutal than what we're narrating that took place in the cemetery. And I say this as regards to this point, as well as to other elements that may take place in the story. We've given them a certain value representatively from what happened in reality, that we don't tell. Everything's got to be in the right place, and it has to have the right dimension. And that allows us to sort of say we can't tell everything that happened. The film lasts for 100 minutes. It could have taken another 3 or 4 minutes, but not many more. There was a moment in which the script lasted 120 minutes, more or less, right? And then there was, and from what we know, there was a diary in which these people covered themselves because they knew that they were in an illegal place. They weren't in the Charrondo police station, and they were taking photos, and there's a diary and where there's a list of what happened. And that diary for many, many years was all over the place, and that was used as blackmail and to cover themselves, that they knew that they were doing something which was anything but legal. There are many things that we could have told. For example, throughout the legal proceedings, when the side of the accused, the defendants, or the side, shall we say, the environment or the people around them started to take reprisals on the witnesses that appeared in the illegal proceedings. Brutal things happened there that we didn't tell. We mentioned 2 or 3 as a summary in one of the sequence, but very little more. But there were many more things that took place. There were bullets and persecutions and chases throughout the city, recording with those big video cameras that they used back then. And people put bullets in people's post boxes, and there were bullets even on the pillows of one of the judges. So we've included 1 magistrate when the truth was that there were 3. Even amongst the Guardia Civil, the Spanish police in Incharrondo, there were 2 groups that were called 81 and 82. They were in charge of these types of things, and many more civil guards or Guardia Civiles, and they knew what was going on. And as they told us on a certain occasion, when we were talking about the Guardia Civil police station, for those of people in San Sebastián, Donostia, we've known what the Incharrondo police headquarters means. There was a person that said, I don't remember, the headquarters had arrested many commandos, but their methods created a lot of commandos. So therefore, we didn't want to include all that and recreate ourselves on that, because otherwise we would have done a TV series more than a 100-minute film.
Allá atrás, por favor.
The back there, please, right at the back. Hi, good afternoon. As regards only the cinematographic language that you've used, we're not talking about a documentary, quite obviously. What I would like to ask you is whether there's no forced fitting in the first statements when the family members are interviewed at the beginning of the film with the rest of the cinematographic language. I'm not too sure whether that's too forced, whether that statement of intention is a bit, perhaps is unnecessary once you see the film. That's the question. Let me answer. Specifically, it's based upon real interviews that were held, which helped us a lot at the beginning as documentation. And even the interviewer, who, as you know, is from ETV, the Basque TV channel, helped us a lot to get to know the sisters. Initially, from the outset, when we got in touch with the two sisters, and as Pablo says, his message in favor of peace is quite clear, we believed that we had to introduce that message in, and they also wanted to do a film which was seeking revenge. So therefore, we believe it's quite normal that we have included this. It was difficult. It was difficult because we agreed that all of a sudden in a film, in fact, we were initially, that interview appeared in the first script in 2 or 3 sections, and then we thought we'd put it in at the end. We didn't know really well where we could fit in, but we know that cinematographically it could be a problem, but that we had to transmit the message in one way or another, almost forced to do so. Hi, good afternoon. I would like to ask you, you weren't able to shoot in La Cumbre, only the arrival of the car there, and they told you that do it very quickly. I would like to know whether you had any further problems in any other locations, what it meant, what those setbacks could have been, and what it meant for you, and then sent the credits. I liked them very, very much, with a very powerful soundtrack, and it reminded me of some credits of any TV series. I'm not too sure whether you have the same perception, and you've mentioned that perhaps it perfectly could have been a TV series with all of the data that you have and information you have available. Well, problems for shooting on location, yes. Well, because we arrived in certain places and they had been threatened or they didn't want to get involved. The beer brand, we're not going to say the name, and it makes no sense, and it's just an anecdote, but because they didn't want to get involved in the film, and it was only exclusively to know what type of film that we were going to make. The La Cumbre, for example, I've talked to La Cumbre, the people in the PP, they said there was an error, there was an order that came directly from up top. So therefore, those people that are here realized that it made no sense. We didn't want to shoot within La Cumbre. I've seen the inside of it. I think it has changed enormously. And even 1995, when Bayo went in to make a statement with Iuid, and also, and I think with López Carrillo, who was there, everything has changed quite a lot. Bayo recognized the places. He even drew a sketch of what we talked about, but everything has been changed. We had no intention of shooting inside, but I would have liked to be able to shoot a sequence in which the boys go towards the cars, and I rehearsed this with the boys, and that sequence, to not allow us to shoot it inside, was eliminated, and we didn't want to go on. We did shoot in La Cumbre because we had permission of the town hall to be able to shoot on location there, and that's why we were able to do so. And as regards to the credits, they are by Raúl López, and the images, who is also the editor. Pascal Gagné has plays the music, and these are very rotund and very powerful credits because it contextualizes what these years have meant, and I think there's sufficient elements in order to introduce, to make the audience fit into the situation as it occurs. Hi, I would like you to go further in depth, if you'd be so kind, in the character of the lawyer's assistant of Íñigo Iruín. And it seems to me he's a character who's very important in the story because it stands out because he can profile the character of the lawyer, but also because of his integrity. And I would like you to go further in depth upon this, because knowing that it's a fictitious, shall we say, character to a certain extent, and also finishing as the way the finisher does, whether that symbolizes something that scene at the end. Could you go further in depth into the character? Yes, for us, that's the meaning. It's a contrast of a character that we wanted to have edges. Unax's character, we didn't want him to be monolithic. We wanted to have those hard edges, and there's a sequence which is dramatized, and it's fiction, which is at the hotel, that we're not going to reveal it, so as not to tell you a lot. But we did need, from the outset, when Joanne talked about the script and started to give us the first versions, we needed someone who also helped in the investigation. These were legal proceedings that we've seen them physically, and there's an enormous amount of volumes of information, and all of those statements of the people that were involved. This took a long time, many years, and Joanne, this character, was very good, so that you could have that point of candor, shall we say, a contrast that starts with certain ideals of only concerned about what are the proved facts and in favor of justice, and there's a sequence which is that the one in the hotel also symbolizes and talks very well of what it means to have the different sensitivities of a person when one has to confront an issue of this nature. There's also another character who's real, and I remember him perfectly well because of the impact of the images that we saw when he dies because of a heart attack. That's a real character, and is treated in a very integral manner. Could you talk about that character, who I think is important in the film because it highlights he's a national policeman? For us, at least for me, I think Johannes, the hero of the film, I think is this man who got involved into the story, because with the quicklime and from what we were told, the GAL victims in that found in that event, it shows that these people should have been buried in Spanish territory in quicklime and with a shot in the head. And they knew that Lasa and Zabala were within Spain, albeit they were kidnapped in France. We were told that there were different, we thought, bones were found with quicklime, and we stood to look for Lasa and Zabala because we knew they were in Spanish territory. And his character, Paco Echevarria, talks a lot and very well about him as a person that shouldn't have got involved in all of these problems, but from the beginning he said it could have been these two young men. The story was very clumsy, from the murder all the way through and then burying them in quicklime. We said that that territory, or that where they were murdered, as it's on a sort of like a hill, they were buried. The burial site, they did it and not very deep, so therefore they hit a rock straight away, and that's why the bodies were very close to the surface. If they'd have gone a bit further out, they would have achieved a much deeper grave, and these boys wouldn't have appeared ever. And in the morgue, the bodies were abandoned for 10 years because in Alicante, and what's very Spanish now, oh, you take the bones. No, I'll take them, or somebody else can take them. Where I'm on holidays, I'll have a look, and whoever does. And then nobody took them, so therefore those coffins were there, stuck there with Lasa and Zabala's body, and 10 years later, thanks to someone did their job the right way and didn't throw the bones away. Paco Echevarria said he arrived there, he knew about, he had a series of references about the teeth of the families, and once he got there and they opened up, and that's what we tell, he said, I saw the bones, I saw their skulls, and these are the two, and he recorded absolutely everything, which is something that we based upon to recreate the bone scene, which are completely exactly the same as to what they did at that time. And he told us that the truth is he recorded it because otherwise he would have had a lot of trouble. Go back to San Sebastian, and perhaps the bones would have changed or they would have disappeared, so therefore he wanted to have a graphic document, at least a video recording, so as to know that that was in the morgue in Alicante. As regards to Inigo and Fede's characters, initially in Fede's character, and the first versions didn't exist, and then we invented it. We invented it so that the Inigo's character could have an interlocutor, someone to talk to, not only with whom to discuss things and debate things, and the ins and outs of the legal proceedings and the decision, but an interlocutor to discuss his own contradictions as a human being, ideological and so on and so forth. In this sense, we could say that perhaps, and symbolically if you deem, both characters are two sides of the same character. Inigo discusses with himself, and at a given moment when Fede disappears because he's died because of the letter bomb, both aspects of the same character melt into one, and that's how we've managed to achieve. That's the way that we found in order to describe a range of character to end up being a different character at the end that he was at the beginning, a character that he wins not because he won the court case, because he's come to an ethical conclusion, a moral conclusion, who becomes much more empathic. He comes to the conclusion that not everything can do. You can't just do everything, and he comes to that conclusion. More or less, I'm not too sure whether you can see things a bit clearer or whether you like it a bit more or not. I don't know. There was a character, a Fede, who was called Regi. And they discussed, their discussions were a bit less. He had an assistant who helped him a lot. And as Pablo said, the legal proceedings had about 12,000 pages long, and there weren't computers back then. And he comes out with a new Apple computer. And to surf through all of those statements, there was a person called Fede who was an assistant, a lawyer from San Sebastian, and the bomb didn't exist either. The bomb didn't exist. We invented that as well. Well, we're inspiring ourselves upon a real fact that 3 letter bombs were sent to different people, one of them to Iñigo Iruin. One of the letter bombs blew up, it killed the postman, the other 2 were intercepted, and we took advantage of that circumstance in order to invent that story. And in fact, the Iñigo in the film isn't Iñigo Iruin, if anyone's asking, by the way. He's invented because Iñigo Iruin, the lawyer, we don't know what he was thinking of about at that period in time, but there wasn't a dramatic or ethical and ideological confrontation as we describe it in the film. A question in the 4th row. Hi, good afternoon. Hi, good afternoon. Congratulations for the film. I haven't heard anyone laughing, albeit when people said at the beginning of the press conference, when the Guardia Civil or the Spanish police, all the contrary, I saw a room of an audience that was that gave a final ovation at the end of the film. I would like to ask the actors, I've always asked me how an actor motivates himself when playing a torturer. It seems to me it's one of the most difficult things, and I would also like to know in detail whether that discourse that Rodrigo Galindo, or that speech when he talks to his men, was that reality, or does that appear in the legal proceedings that he did things that way? And the only time there's a smile when Rodrigo Galindo says, with men like them, we would conquer the continent. And there was a bit of a smile there and a bit of a laugh. I also would like to go, on the other hand, whether there's been any, do you fear any reaction with real people who are involved in the film? That is to say, who are mentioned in the film with names and surnames. Thank you very much. Shall I start and then the actors? Yes. Well, as regards the moment of Galindo talking to his men, speaking to his men, we knew that in the beginning of September, well, halfway through the month of September in 1983, a month before Lasa and Zabala were kidnapped, we have 2 versions. He called them into his living room at his home, and he called up this group of Guardia Civiles from Incharrondo in his office. The coincidence is that we met a person who is closely linked to, I'm not going to talk about him too much because it's brought about certain problems as a Guardia Civil he told me that it was impossible for it to be in the living room of Rodríguez Galindo's house because his wife would never have allowed that anyone that's not from their family, and so therefore that meeting in the living room of his house couldn't have been, albeit he mentions that he knew that a meeting had taken place somewhere. So therefore on the script I talked to Joanes and we decided to use his office, which Galindo Weather lived on the 1st floor A, and the office was on the other side, on the other hand of the house. It was of another flat on the other side. It was an empty house with an amount of a lot of trophies that have been seized or confiscated from commandos and groups that they had arrested, and so on. And that was done in his office. But initially it was approached that it was going to be his living room. But when we were told this, we said, well, yes, but that meeting, we know that there were a couple of people. We have included a couple of people left, and those are the ones. In Charrondo, for example, if anyone is from abroad, is a police headquarters is a contradiction in terms. It's a house, or is it a police headquarters? A house or a headquarters. On the 5th floor, things were taking place, and on the bottom floor, the woman, the husband, the wife of a captain was cooking some fried eggs. Just to imagine that situation when we talk about the horrible things that have taken place with these two young men, well, you can see how that's the way things worked in this country. And as regards to the other question, the last question, that is it. Well, we know nothing about. Well, these are people that are 50-something years old, apart from Galindo, who's 78. I think he was 45 when this happened. Some things have been told about their lives now, but I think that these are just anecdotes of everyone's private lives, so I'm not going to talk about this. I don't think that no matter how naive it is, the question is whether we might have legal problems if. Well, from the outset, we've tried to make sure that everything is said in the accusations and the sentences of the trials are based upon the legal proceedings, upon the documents that we have. There are some specific sentences that are taken directly from the legal proceedings. What we've enabled to be more dramatic in, the people that are not involved, that aren't sentenced, the names of those people that appeared, like, for example, Íñigo or Fede. Well, if we told them what we were going to do, they liked a few things better than that, but they admitted the fact that it was a film, and that's the way we did. And the rest, well, I imagine we haven't asked them, we haven't called Galindo, no Bayo, no Dorado, sincerely. We had the phone numbers of some of them, but we said, what for? I would like to know, and we've talked about this several times, after 30 years, as a personal curiosity, what mental situations do these people have now, whether they regret everything that happened, or they think that was barbaric, or did it form part of the strategy they used back then? At a personal level, after having lived this story for a year and a half and made the film, I have the curiosity to know whether these people 30 years after believe that it's absolutely horrible, and they believe that they don't even know why they participated, or they're convinced that they did what they had to do. The culture brought in Incharrondo, the people, the terror that these people had when they left Incharrondo and the rest of the police headquarters, and they had to patrol the streets. Well, there were people who, as they were telling you, to a person, he started to cry. He said, well, they've suffered enormously with this story, and to go outside in the street, there's a moment of brutal tension, and they ended up being completely going almost mad. Many of them have that these destinations were almost as a punishment. Bayo, for example, had an incident, and it's told in the story that he shot his gun in a discotheque in Madrid, and he was brought here because of what he did there. And also in Irún, there was a boutique that was attacked, robbed, and so forth. We're talking about these characters that I don't want to extend it to the Guardia Civil in general, because I think, well, because we're not been talking about the Guardia Civil as a body and it's a police force. They've got protocols which are completely different to what they used at that time. Actors? Well, in my case, and with Pablo, we were talking about how to be able to an actor to understand why this character does what he does, and to a certain extent you try to find the motivation there. I tried to understand that he was a victim to a certain extent. He finds himself in this world of horror, and he's brought there because he knows he'll do what they want him to do. So therefore, the Bayo's character has this component to him that for me is painful as a character, because he's a character who's totally out of control. And so, to a certain extent, I tried to ensure that the emotions, those dark emotions and violent emotions, could be motivated and stemming from the pain that this character was feeling, so that these character, and as we said before, to try not to fall into a caricature. We want him to be human and also, in turn, to be in darkness as well. Yes, to a certain extent, we've got to be very rigorous when you portray any character, and any character has two sides to it, like a coin, like everyone be. One has a pleasanter side and one that's not too pleasant. And in this film, what might happen is that we've seen the unpleasant side. When we prepared the characters, we tried to understand the other side and the needs, that other side, and the needs of that other side, which make the characters act as they do. And another important thing is that the military side of things and the hierarchies, these two individuals were following orders, independent of the fact that they lived them one way or another. And there is a treaty in psychology, which is called the Treaty of Disobedience, through which you justify that any individual under orders, under hierarchy, ends up losing his will. And it's not a question of justifying the facts, but they're unable, completely unable to articulate their own ethics. Very few people rebel against their authority or their superiors. The torture scenes were very intense, and during, I think it was generalized, the whole crew, there was a lot of filming at night, and the atmosphere was very hard and a lot of tension. And I think that's reflected undoubtedly in the film. Any further questions? Yes, please. Over here. One more question. I would like to ask Pablo, in which way Italian films of the 1970s and 80s upon legal proceedings, and Latin American film upon the people that are missing, for example, have affected the script and your directing, and finally, whether the character of the protected witness that appears at the last moment is a real character, or whether it's a character that also forms part of the fiction that you approached. Chofo Meveliz is a man who died in November 2011 or 2012, a couple of years ago. He lived in the Antiguo part of San Sebastian. He was a real person. He was well known in San Sebastian and discotheques, so therefore he's a character who's absolutely real, and he participated, I think, in Pepe Navarro's programs. I think there was a moment where he needed money, and he's the character. He's a real character. The Italian, when Rebordino saw the film, he asked me exactly the same question. He said, I know about this Italian. I don't have a very extensive film culture, but several people have talked to me about this. I personally saw Grajo Limpo and another film, but I realized with Joanna's script and my own idea, I wanted to portray tortures, etc. The torture, I thought that we were going to do it in the way that it appeared in the script, and do it our own way, without thinking about other films as an influence. Another question there, please. Yes, could you raise your hand so that people can see you? Yes, Unax Ugalde, to what extent you've inspired upon into the construction of your character in Íñigo Iruín, the lawyer who undertook the Lasa and Zabala case, after what the scriptwriter said, or did you want to take a step back from the real character and get closer to the character that is reflected on the script, in the script? Thank you. The character that I portray in the film is inspired in Íñigo Iruín, who was the person that when these family members, one of the mothers listened that two bodies had appeared, they didn't know who to talk to. They went to Íñigo Iruín. Remember, one of the lawyers who is the most important constitutionalist lawyers in this country and most respected. And for me to portray this role has been a luxury, because my character, we can say, is the backbone of the film, but this film, I see him as an antagonist. I think the most important thing was the case, and then my character. And how did I approach it? Well, when I started to study about Lasa and Zabala and read several books, the best thing was to get close to approach my character. I did it with the Opus Dei when I did Padre Castillo, but unfortunately he died a couple of years beforehand. So therefore, with a lot of people in Opus Dei, I went to Inuit and he took me in very well, cordially. We spent 3 hours talking about the case. What I was interested in knowing was above all how a lawyer of his stature would confront everything that he had to confront, especially with the pain and sorrow of these people that were beside him, that he had no answer, no response by part of the state, that people that should have answered him, give them answers. There was a long conversation where we talked about the legal proceedings as well as those 12-year disappearance, how he lived this with the families, and this was very enriching for me. What happens in the film is that the character, we've summarized it just to Inigo because there's no room to develop his personality and how he lived it internally, and we wanted to make a little twist there, and as the scriptwriter have said, we want to see there's a character that advanced, to progress to a certain sense. I talked to him before and then he's seen the film. He's very happy. The only thing that got him very, very angry is that he smokes more than 1 cigarette a day, and he's a cyclist. He only smokes 1 cigarette a day, and he loved it apart from that.
Sí, aquí, por favor.
Vaya a ver, Arratsaldeon. Pablo.
Hi, good afternoon. Congratulations for the film. It's a film, it's a very good film, and it seems to me that it's a very courageous film, very audacious. There was a lot of people wanted to see this film very, very much, and I think everyone was very satisfied on the one hand. I would like to ask a question to the actors, to Nux, and those that have acted as Hoshi and Hoshian, the actors. It seems to me that seeing the film, it seems to me very difficult how some actors and how they work to enter into the role of the characters that they have to portray, because Lasa and Zabala are symbols. They've turned into symbols in our society, and at the end of the day, everyone understands the situation the way it's very a personal way thing. I think it's a very praiseworthy piece of work. How have you worked to enter into those characters, to confront that enormous challenge, to respond to this, and on the other hand, to Unux? I would like to tell you that Unux's work was excellent, very good, and I saw the film with Inigo Iruin's friend, and he said he was quite surprised because you're very similar to Inigo Iruin. He thinks he looked like him very much, and I would like to know how you have done to get under his skin and to get her under his skin and to enter into the character and to reproduce his gestures and his character and put this on the screen. Thank you very much. To prepare the character, the truth is the process has been quite long. We've had a lot of rehearsals with Pablo, and the truth is, and to get involved into the torture scenes, it was quite a lot of experimenting, albeit that we tried to be empathic towards these young men. A person who's never gone through these intense moments is practically unable to know what they felt in reality. So we've experimented and tested a lot, and also we had the good luck of being with the families who helped us very much, and they explained what the boys were like, the young men, and how the family felt the moment of when they disappeared. And perhaps the less prepared moment, or the moment in which that we had to feel, was the moment when they die, that we practically didn't touch it. We rehearsed this in the castings. I remember we did prepare it, but then we left them there, and then I think this was that was great, because to go to record in Bouchot, for example, it transmitted quite a lot, and I think that made that what came out of us in our portrayal, emotionally speaking, was different. That it seemed much more natural. That not having prepared it, for me, one of the sisters said something to me, and that was, I'm convinced that the last thought of my brother would have been for my mother. And I think that in moments like that, to be able to use these resources is very good. And apart from the fact that the actors, Oriol, Ricard, and Javier Mora and Iñaki obviously took care of us, and they helped us very much in the shoot, and they made things much easier for us. I would like to add one little gesture, and that is another thing that has helped us enormously has been that throughout, over time, it's not something that we've lived through, so therefore that distance has helped us to recreate the character, to not take it so personally. We have technically developed everything that we had to do, and we've investigated what we had to do. But once we started to film and shoot, the work was much more technical, so therefore it's very difficult for an actor to take the feelings to the extreme when one's recording, because that's very technical. We're trying to achieve a certain result, undoubtedly. So therefore we have always tried in the rehearsals to explore the character so that when we record and shoot, to know exactly and how and where to do it, because we've got to find a balance here in order between how savage it was and how crude and raw it was, and the emotional side. As we're very young, we've only read about it when we prepared our characters through the press, and that has helped us, not many people that affected us with what happened, and to control our emotions a bit better. And the preparation of the character of Iñigo, there are two ways to prepare it: inside out or outside in. That's say to use the makeup, we must highlight the makeup that Carmela Soler done with the makeup artist, not only with me in the film and the rest of the actors, because we started in 1983 and we finished up in 2000. My character, over these years, it develops. The characterization and the makeup that Carmen de Soler said helped me a lot. But albeit, having said this, all of the videos that you see on YouTube, thank God we actors, we can use the videos on YouTube, and we can see many things, and also the conversation that I had with him. But when you address portraying a character, if you understand the suffering or the perseverance or the work that this gentleman had to do for those 12,000 pages of the legal proceedings and all the vicissitudes that he had against him, the character emerged slowly but surely. And also a conversation with Pablo Malo, the director. He's an exquisite actor's director, and he helped us very much. But to bring all of that out, there's an anecdote, and all of a sudden Inigo appeared in the shoot. He appeared on the set, and he came with his son, and his son couldn't stop laughing when he was looking in the small screen. He said, I looked very much like a father. When I do characters, I don't try to imitate, because I'm not an imitator. I like to draw the characters from the essence, from what they live within, and the rest comes out with the help of Carmela Soler's makeup as well. Thank you.
¿Más preguntas, por favor?
Further questions?
No hay ninguna más.
No further questions?
Hola, buenas tardes.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm from abroad, and I don't know the industry of here too much, of how the films are shot in Spanish and Basque. And now I see in the headphones, not everybody speaks Basque. How does that work on set? To be an exquisite character director, how do you do this when it's a language that not everyone dominates or controls? Well, I like to work with actors. It's one of the great advantages of my profession. You meet a lot of actors and you work with them. And the language issue wasn't a great problem for me, because I had people around me who controlled the Basque language, whether there was a set that went one way or another. I wasn't too concerned about this. I was more concerned about the fact that the actors had the intention, and we had worked a lot in the portrayal and of the characters. That wasn't a problem for me, because it's a film that was really strongly worked upon before the shooting of it, and we've shot in a very natural way. Just in the same way we talk about in this country, it's a bilingual. You can see people speaking in Basque as well as in Spanish, and quite fortunately this film was perfect for it, because it made no sense that Galindo's character would have spoken in Basque. It would have been something absolutely absurd and ridiculous. So therefore, in that sense, this film was naturally very good for the usage of both languages. As regards to those two languages, I want to thank Pello Sarasola, who was the director in EITV, when they approved their participation in the film, because as you know, especially all of you that are here, ETV1, the Basque television channel, all the characters always speak in Basque. And from the outset, when we said that we didn't believe the film if they were all shot in Basque, you said, well, let's make an exception here. So therefore, the film, when it's shown on ETV, on the Basque television channel, will be exactly the same as you saw it today. The characters that speak in Basque, that will speak in Basque, those that speak in Spanish, will speak in Spanish with subtitles in Basque. And then obviously on ETV2, another Spanish channel, as it was seen today. But it was an exception, and I imagine that you've seen sometimes that it's not a lot of fun when you're listening to an interview, someone speaking Spanish, and there's someone behind speaking Basque, you don't understand one or the other. Here, they made an exception, and I think it's very positive. So thank you very much to Pello Sarsola, who understood it from the outset. Congratulations to the whole team for all the work you've carried out and for putting this story on the screen. I would like to ask, this story can have its impact in the Basque Country and in Spain, but I'm asking you whether it can be distributed internationally. We know that in Ireland many films have been made that reflect the political conflict there, and they've been successful at an international level. And I would like to know whether we could take the possibility of projecting this film internationally because it's being projected in this international film festival. Well, we hope that such is the case. In some countries, I think that this case will be well received. You've talked about Ireland, but unfortunately there are other countries where torture is carried out, and these barbaric tortures take in Latin America, unfortunately in Argentina and Chile. So therefore I think that for them it will be something that they've known and something that they've seen before, and I hope that it will be well received in those countries. The fact that it's in the San Sebastian Film Festival, we believe, first of all, which would be the best place to premiere it, and so therefore we thought the best place would be this festival, the San Sebastian Film Festival. So therefore we worked very quickly, quite in depth, nevertheless, to present the film on time and submit it, and then also the festival direction approved it, and they've taken us in, and that was our objective from the outset. Any further questions, ladies and gentlemen? No? Well, thank you very much to all of you.